Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tikkun Leil Shavuot. I'm very excited to get to introduce Eddie in just a moment, but those of you who've ever been to Israel, including some people who are just back from Israel, may know that the conservative movement in Israel is known as the Masorti movement. The Masorti movement, and one of the names for Jewish tradition is Mesoret, and the verb for that, limsor, means that which we pass on or transmit. Tonight's theme really is the different forms of Mesoret, the different ways that Jews have found to transmit Yiddishkeit, Judaism, through their passions, through modes that really make sense to them. And we'll get to experience that through panel, through a couple of sessions. Without any further ado, I just want to introduce someone who needs no introduction, Eddie Schulman. No, I mean, Eddie, you're making that face, but it is true, right? I mean, you are a fixture, not a light bulb, but a fixture of Neve Shalom, and you are known for many things here, but one of the things that she is very famous for are the talit clips that she often makes for her, the kids you tutor, and the glass art and aura. So art and Jewish art has been a really powerful way to transmit Jewish values and teachings, and let's hear what Eddie has to say about that.
Thank you, Rabbi. Not only is art a way of transmitting, but it's also, for me, more importantly, the vehicle for how I get into Torah a little more deeply. It's opened up another way of study that I had never engaged in before. So there is a part coming up where I'm going to invite you to participate in something, so don't be shy. Don't be shy. Thank you. How many of you consider yourselves an artist? Raise your hand. That's pretty good. How many of you like to do art but would never call yourself an artist? Yeah, more hands. Not so. How about musicians? How many of you like music but would never call yourself a musician? Yeah. So, and I could ask the same question about writers and dancers and all those things. I am a reluctant artist. And I could tell you stories, but I only have half an hour. Needless to say, I came to glass accidentally. Yeah, I needed to teach art, and I learned how to do stained glass, and it was okay. Nothing great, didn't really light me up, and I had an opportunity to learn fused glass. And all of a sudden, everything changed. I suddenly saw Hebrew letters just dancing. I began to see things in a Jewish framework, and I could just visualize it. And it was astonishing. And the only thing holding me back was my lack of skill. So I kind of put the Jewish stuff on hold and worked on the craft of working with glass, and I got better. I'm not there yet wherever there is. I never will be. I hope I will never be there. But I'm now at a place where I can use glass to explore Yiddishkeit, to learn Torah, to learn prayer. And I'm hoping that I can offer you that same kind of invitation to find your vehicle, your way in. I didn't know about glass until about 25 years ago, and I didn't know from fusion until about 20 years ago. So don't ever shut the door on finding your art. So let me see if we can go forward. So I wager if we were all to share the ways in which we practice Judaism, we would find out we all do it differently. There are many ways to be Jewish. There are many ways to be an artist, and there are many, many, many ways to access Torah. And so this is just one of the ways that I come at it. We're going to do a little Torah study, all of us, and this is your participatory part of it all. This is the bracha, and I ask you to read it along with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And what I love, every time I say that, the word la'asok sounds like soak in English. And I want us to soak ourselves into this. So tomorrow morning, if you come to shul, wherever you go to shul, the second reading, if they're using our triennial cycle, is going to be this. This is the translation. I'm going to read it out loud. Your job, each of you, is to pick a word or a phrase, not a whole sentence, please. A word or a short phrase that you like. I highlighted one. That's mine. It's not proprietary. You can also have that. But you're going to pick 1 to 2 words or phrases within this piece that call to you. Okay? And then I'll tell you what to do. Moses went down from the mountain to the people. He sanctified them, and they immersed themselves and their clothing. Moses said to the people, "Keep yourselves in readiness for 3 days. Do not come near a woman." The third day arrived. There was thunder and lightning in the morning, with a heavy cloud on the mountain and an extremely loud blast of a ram's horn. The people in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out of the camp toward the divine presence. They stood transfixed at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was all in smoke because of the presence that had come down on it. God was in the fire, and its smoke went up like the smoke of a lime kiln. The entire mountain trembled violently. There was the sound of a ram's horn, increasing in volume to a great degree. Moses spoke, and God replied with a voice. Pick a word or pick a phrase. You can pick more than one. And what we're going to do is we're going to create what I call a text-rendered poem. We're going to call it out loud. And so I'll begin with my verse, and I might repeat it, or I might pick out another one. You might toss out a line, and you might repeat it, or you'll pick a different one. But ideally, everybody in the room speaks out at least once. What if 2 people do it at the same time? One of you graciously bows out. We're not raising hands. It's not school. I'm not calling on you. But the idea is to keep those words and phrases moving until I put up my hand. Everybody got something? Okay, let's do this. Thunder and lightning in the morning.
Keep yourselves in readiness. Mount Sinai was all in smoke. Divine presence.
A lime kiln.
Readiness.
Thunder and lightning in the morning. So we just took this beautiful passage from Torah and we took out images. Almost all of you touched at least one of the senses, of the 5 senses. There's visual, there's auditory, there's smell, there's everything in this one little reading. And we, as a group, created this collective poem. It's really powerful. It's really powerful. And that's just a little glimpse into one way that you can get into Torah, is just to take it out of context and mess it around a little bit and have fun with it and see what you get. So the biggest word I can come up with for this, other than having audacity, is you have permission to have audacity, to go ahead and push yourself beyond your comfort level and try to get into Torah in some way using whatever modality works for you. So I have some examples I'll show. I'm going to go pretty quickly through them. But these are some examples of some of the work I've done using fused glass to interpret Torah and other things. So one of my first big projects was I spent a year studying Torah. And every couple months, I would go into one book of Torah. Started at the beginning, of course, with Bereshit. And my goal was to create a Torah adornment or breastplate that would capture visually and in a couple of words what the entire book was all about. So it's kind of the opposite of commentary where there's words and words and words and words. I wanted to bring it down. So the first one on the left, that's Bereshit. I created this smashed glass with a crown because I thought that creation was God's crowning achievement. And the question that hopefully the viewer asks is, well, is that the world that God was assembling, or was that the world that God chose to destroy? And I distilled the words into just two, Ruach Elohim. I felt like all of Bereshit for me was about the breath and the spirit of God. The centerpiece is from Leviticus, and of course there's tons and tons and tons of sacrifices and all that kind of stuff, and all of that was about fire, which brought about holiness. And so I couldn't go with anything else but the word Kedoshim. Kedoshim was the word that just emerged very plainly. The final one that I'm showing you tonight is from Deuteronomy. So in all of Deuteronomy, we have a repetition. Moses retells our story to the people, reviews all the rules, and there's a gateway of sorts, a metaphorical gateway into the promised land. And it's a new generation going forward. And what it says is b'chol levavecha, with all of your heart. And that's what I came to understand in my study of Dvarim. Am I right? Doesn't matter. Do you like it? Doesn't matter. It's the journey ultimately, and often I'll make things and go, but the journey was worth it. There are two other ones, but they are not in my possession, and I can't find photos of them. One resides somewhere in Southwest Portland, and the other in Florida. So let's move on. Oops. For the 150th anniversary of the shul, I made a Torah adornment to go on a high holiday Torah that we use downstairs, and that was to honor the synagogue, so the Ten Commandments should look a little familiar. This one has a story, Min HaMeitzar. Actually, Esther was with me, not when I conceived of this plate, but when I sold it. Min HaMeitzar comes from Psalms, and we sing it during our Hallel service. And it was Rosh Chodesh. I was downstairs in the little chapel, and I was really in the moment, and we began singing Min HaMeitzar, and all of a sudden in my head, I'm going, Min HaMeitzar. Oh, I've been there. I've been in those narrow places. And I suddenly saw the glass and said, I know what I'm going to do. And after Shabbos, I took this incredibly expensive piece of glass, raw glass. It's about $50 for an 8-inch square. And I hit it with a hammer. And then I replaced all of the pieces on top of a piece of black and fused it and put it on a larger base. Slumped it into a plate. And Esther and I are at the Jewish Community Center in Mercer Island, Washington. And it's a bleak day. Nobody's coming, nobody's shopping, and we're bored out of our minds. And all of a sudden, I see this woman making a straight arrow just drive for my booth. And I'm thinking, huh. And she walks right up to this plate, holds it up and says, tell me about this. So I explained about Min HaMeitzar, and she starts crying. And I said, are you okay? And she said, I have had a year from hell. I have had one problem after another. I'm not going to go into it, but I was standing over there and I saw your plate and I was drawn to it and I came over here and now I have to buy it and I'm going to go home and I'm going to read Psalms. And I got goosebumps. It was the first time that my art actually had an impact. And I don't know if I've ever had a moment quite like that since, but it turned her on to Psalms, and that's a cool thing. Seder plate, nothing dramatic here other than I felt like this was just the most perfect piece of glass, and I did nothing but cut out Hebrew letters to say Pesach. And it speaks to me of water and desert and wandering and Seders. This is kind of deconstructed mezuzah. What's inside? A lot of people have no idea. And so I thought it'd be fun to do a series of deconstructed mezuzot. And my Chanukiah. I also study Musar, which is a practice of developing intentions, midot, and trying to develop my character to become a better human being. Emet means truth, and you can see the rainbow, the gradations of color, and that's my interpretation of the different kinds of truth we tend to tell. So let's shift gears just a little bit. When you come to shul to pray, you know that there's some keva, there's a structure, there's a format, there's a way of doing things. There's a framework, and it structures how we do things, where you can find things in the prayer book. Baruch Hu always comes before the Shema, right? You just know this. But to walk into the synagogue and just instantly, I'm there, I'm in the moment, that doesn't happen. Human beings aren't like that. So we need, in order to get into prayer, we need some kavanah. We need to find the intention. We need to find the devotion. We need to find that emotional, spiritual space. And I think that's true when you're doing art. I think that's true when you're writing. I think that's true when you're singing music or playing music. You have to get into that place because humans are not light switches. We don't turn ourselves on. We don't walk through the door, go, I'm here, okay, then start shuckling and I'm in it. That's why we have things like putting on the talit. That's why we wrap ourselves. That's why we close our eyes and we have the service structured in a way that it brings us, it warms us up to feel something. And then if we're very lucky and we've worked at it, we're in the moment and we can really pray. We're rheostats. We slowly warm up. We're the dimmer switch, right? We warm into things and we cool down. So whenever I now do artwork, I've had about 3 different brachot that I've used, and this is the one that stuck with me now for a while. Baruch atah Adonai, makor hachayim shebara otanu b'tzalmo, umizmin otanu lechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer yitzirim. This is written by a Bay Area rabbi who runs a Jewish art studio, and she's phenomenal. She's organized a lot of amazing things. So I say that, and then I get into the work. And the work is mostly in my head. It takes me a really long time. I'm slow. It takes me a really long time to figure out what it is I want to do. And that's my Torah study. So it begins with a word or a phrase or a concept. and then I stew over it. And Rabbi Ben Bagbag, he taught it to us very well. You turn it, and you turn it, and you turn it, and you turn it again and again, right? And that's the original, in red, that's the original quote translated. It takes a lot of time for me to come up with what I want. So I'll take you back to the time of COVID. You remember that time at Source? A little bit hard to forget. I'm an introvert, so I was actually having a very good time. And, I was just making class and having fun and not doing anything very serious, but just improving my skills. And then one day, the news came on, and there was the headline. In 9 minutes and 29 seconds, George Floyd was killed. And it shook me to my core. Maybe it certainly wasn't the first or second or third time that I'd heard about victims of racial violence. Maybe it's because I'm the child of survivors of the Holocaust, but it shook me yet again. It was like, when is this ever going to stop? And it stuck with me, and it haunted me, and it bothered me. And I knew that I had to do something. And I decided that this was going to be a part of what I would do during COVID. I would find a way to be an activist through art and send a message, ideally Jewishly. And so I had to research, and I did a lot of fretting. I can't begin to tell you how much. And I wanted to do this through the lens of Torah. So the question was, how do I understand the Jewish teaching that has to do with this kind of awful behavior? And I started doing more research. I wanted to know, was there a star that Black people in Europe had to wear when they were captured? And indeed there was. I started thinking about Jim Crow and Nazis and lynchings. I looked at American history that I'd taught for years in public school. And mostly the red writing there is just stuff that I had journaled very quickly at my workbench. And then I found Rabbi Judah Low, who was the Maharal of Prague, and he talked about, the emotion, the soul, and the spirit. And finally, I landed in Leviticus. I went back to Kedoshim, that book about holiness. Do not stand idly by while your neighbor's blood is shed. And that was it. I didn't have an image yet, but that's what I hung on to. That's what made sense to me, was that I had to pursue something about not standing idly by. I wanted to look up things in Yiddish, because Yiddish is the warm and fuzzy language. Hebrew is the contractual, the legal, I just needed something a little warmer and fuzzier because I was feeling so crappy. And this cracked me up. So these are the acronym for Black Lives Matter. And what does it say in Yiddish? Black Lives Matter. No, that was not satisfying. So I kept looking. I tried to use Black Lives Matter, and I realized I can't put Yiddish on somebody else's symbol. That's wrong. So started over. I started thinking about who are all the people who had been victims. It wasn't just George Floyd. And I printed out the names of all these people. The source was babynames.com, and they had printed this saying that they stand in solidarity with the Black community because of these deaths. And so I printed it out and put it next to my workbench. And every time I started to do work, I would look at their names. And it reminded me very Jewishly of things like our Yizkor books that we use on Yom Kippur, our Yortzeit lists, our healing lists. Names are important. We use names in our tradition all the time. And these people mattered. Their names mattered to me. So then I went back to the Yiddish. What imagery do I use? What kind of words do I use? Where do I even go? And I finally found 3 different options. Afro-Amerikaner Lebens haben Wert. African-American lives have value. That was not bad. Kind of like that. Afro-Amerikaner Lebens sind wichtig. They are necessary. They are important. Afro-Amerikaner Blut ist nicht kein Wasser. Bingo. African American blood is not water. That was it. We do not spill blood like we might casually spill water. And that was it for me. And I told you why the Yiddish. The Yiddish because it's the Mama Loshen. It's what I grew up hearing. And it can soften for me the harshness of what terrifies me. So I started thinking more and more and more, and I came up with, oh, it's a crime scene. It's the classic crime scene. I can see a sidewalk, I can see a body with a chalk outline, and there's blood. And so it's at this point I finally started to make the glass. All of this was weeks. The glass took me about 5 days. I work with music, so when I first take out the glass and start cutting, it's a yai-da-dai-dai-dai. It's something that I'm singing, and it might morph into a prayer. It might morph into a song. And usually it's just on repeat. I just keep going and going. And that brings me into, that's part of my preparation, and it keeps me focused and in the mood. This is the piece that I made. In Yiddish, it says in the red letters, African American blood, it's not water. So if you look at that, do you know whose body that is? Is it a black person's body? Is it a Jew? Is it a Buddhist? Is it a Muslim? Is it a homosexual? Is it male? Is it female? Because it doesn't matter, right? Ultimately, when the body is removed and you see the chalk outline, it doesn't matter who is a victim. Human being, God's creation. So I invite all of you to find a way into Torah, wrestle with something, turn it again and again, bring your kavanah, use your structure, your keva, and give yourself permission. Chag Sameach. That was it. That was they were given a star with that lettering on it.
Thank you, Eddie. I thought it was a Jewish presentation until you ended exactly on time. It was shocking. I want to call all the panelists up, so Eddie, don't go too far. And as people come up, I just want to begin by framing this evening with the first Mishnah in the first chapter of Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our ancestors, which says, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, u'misara Yehoshua, v'Yehoshua lezkenim, v'zkenim leneviim, u'neviim misarahu le'anshei Knesset Hagdolah. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. And a lot of people may wonder, how come Pirkei Avot starts in that way? And it's a really radical line, as simple as it is to say, and as well known as many of us, as it may be to some of us. But it's interesting because, it doesn't say God gave. Shavuot is Zman Matan Toratenu, which is the time of the giving of our Torah. And yet what it says is that word Masorah that I began with. It speaks about receptivity, right? That Moses received and Moses passes on, right? You receive first, and then you give it back out. There's a famous poem about when making an axe, the model is not far away, meaning that you have an axe in your hand with a blade, and you use that to chop the wood to make the next axe. And something similar is happening with Torah with that. But what's interesting is that Moses passes it on, and not just as a scroll or a speech, but as a living tradition, right? That's what sort of sustained us and held us from Moses to Joshua, a chain, right? It was a living chain that went unbroken, at least at this part, until the destruction of the Second Temple and until the dispersion of the Jews. Up until that point, this Masorah was included something known as smicha, or the laying on of hands. And rabbis originally actually had hands that were laid on them when it was transmitted to them, and so forth. But the thing that I think is really, really beautiful about this particular Mishnah is that the role of the person who receives and then passes it on isn't the same. First of all, there's no one like Moses, but Moses is the prophet par excellence, total access to everything. And then it goes on. Joshua, okay, the book of Joshua is contained within Nevi'im. He's a prophet, but lesser so, right? And it just goes on, and ultimately you get to the men of the Great Assembly, who are just legal folks. So that contained in the very first Mishnah, Pirkei Avot, we know that there's a lot of different ways to pass on Torah, and that's the only way it could be if it's a living tradition. And yes, that direct transmission may have ended after the destruction of the temple, but even that didn't stop us, and we continued on, and here we all are passing on Torah in our own ways. So if we had more time, I would love to ask everyone on the panel the exact same questions, but we don't, so these will be sort of targeted to people and not any particular order, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. But I want to start with Moira Vicky right here. Vicky, you've taught prayers to generations of our kids here, right? In preparation for just to learn and for B'nai Mitzvah too. But I was wondering if you could share with us what you've learned about how children actually absorb Torah, what works, what doesn't, what surprises you in that effort. And if you wouldn't mind, could you even share some of the materials that you've used to transmit Torah to them?
Thank you. Good evening, Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.
What works? What works is taking a prayer and breaking it down into steps, into little sections. Handing an entire brachot, for example, in Kamocha, to an 11-year-old will get you nowhere quickly. Plus, you'll get phone calls from the parents. So if the child can actually read that first line of the prayer, great, now you know you have a reader. If the child looks at that first line and can decode it, and decoding means that they are reading letter, vowel, letter, vowel, letter, vowel. It's not smooth reading. Then you know you have to work one line at a time. And if the child looks at it and then you know you have to start with what? The Aleph Bet, right. And you have to then bring that back into their area. What else works? Homework every week. That topic that just about makes them all turn the color of this tablecloth. What do you mean? I've got dancing, I've got tennis, I've got bowling, I've got a birthday party Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Well, guess what? Someday you won't be 11, someday you'll be 35, and you'll have a job, and you'll have to work all the time, And you'll want a house, and you'll have to pay the mortgage, and you won't have all that. And you got to think about that. And guess what? You're still going to be Jewish. They don't want to hear it, but that's how it is. What else works? Bringing them into this room. I was thrilled when this sanctuary was built because it was a medium between our main sanctuary and Zidel. It was a place that brought the outside in with all of its windows. It also was a place that wasn't daunting, and the class could come in here and we could open up the ark. I was also thrilled because it has no stairs. You do not want to see 11 and 12-year-old kids going into that room unattended, because if you do, you won't like it. They jump off of the bima and they do all kinds of things, and they run up and down the ramp. And so this room here physically creates an atmosphere of, oh, wow, this is really a sanctuary. We really need to open up this ark and look at it. So we would come in here all the time. Carrying the Torah works, even though they're not legal in the sense that they have had their bar bat mitzvah. They have to practice at some point. And practice means they have to feel it, they have to touch it, they have to go home and tell their mom and their dad and their uncle. And then after they have that practice of actually holding it, then we start having the practice of walking while they're holding it. And they get fair warning. I say, do not come in those stupid Nike shoes that you slip on and slip off. Don't come in flip-flops. You need to be wearing either a tie shoe, no high heels, and for the most part, most of them would come in those shoes, and then we would practice walking and walking. And some of them, after a couple weeks, even said, look more, Vicki. They were proud of the muscles that they had. Also, what works is microphone practice. Many kids come up to this and they are afraid. This is, also they're not used to hearing their own voice. You know, some of them have really weird voices. And then when they hear it, that's not me. Oh yeah, it's you. We need to talk about how you do or don't say the letter R, on and on and on and on and on. So that works. This really works. What else works? Hold on. Sorry. This works. Why does it work? Because a lot of children have vision problems. A lot of children are left-handed. This year I had 2 of them. So when they have a Hebrew notebook and they have to hold it, how can they now write? So I make photocopies. We put it on this for the Vision Kid. The Vision Kid also now can take and they can follow along with their finger. Also, I have kids that have a lot of unique learning styles. They can't all do it like this. They have to have it formatted differently. I bought this at Goodwill about 30 years ago for $1, and I use it every year. So this works. What doesn't work? What doesn't work is pairing up 2 children who are in the same class and saying, go out in the hallway for 3 minutes and work on a prayer. Whether they're friends or whether they're not friends, it doesn't work. So I learned quickly, don't do that anymore. Having students write in Hebrew, that is very helpful, even if they're not really writing a real word, just to have them practice it. Because, and I'm not talking about cursive, I'm talking about block printing Hebrew, because it gets them used to coming from this direction. and they have to get used to it. So I do a lot of body exercises with them so that they are going in the correct direction. It also helps, what works is to talk to your parents. And I learned very quickly, we have a unique group of parents here. They pay a lot of money, and when they come here, they expect a lot. Some of them you may never see, honestly. I had many years of phone calling before there was texting, and I would let them know what was going on, and that worked. It worked for a lot of kids. And I have to say, here's what surprises me. I will still have parents come up to me 4 or 5 years after a bar mitzvah of their child that I had as a student, and they say, my kid was talking about his bar mitzvah the other day. Thank you so much for really sitting on him to do the homework. You know, it does. It surprises me. I love it. I do. And then I have to say, I tell the kids, the girls particularly, do not wear your hair in a top knot. What is their answer? Why not? Because you can't get a kippah to sit up there. Oh yeah, that caused quite a commotion one year because every girl in the class had hair to here, they all wore it like that. Anyway, we got through that. So I share all of this because it's not just Ivrit, it's not just the Hebrew, it's a package deal. And we have to look at the human. Grant you the human is 11, but we still have to look at that human. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Rabbi Posen, I think that's a really wonderful segue because you have taught all ages within our community, from the littles to the olds, and everyone sort of in between, families, adults. So what are some differences and surprising, perhaps for some similarities, in how different age groups take in Torah?
Kids ask better questions. That was my mic. I wasn't going to drop it because, you know, the mic. But, I mean, the truth is, when you think about it, I'm always amazed at the kinds of questions kids ask because they haven't had the curiosity beaten out of them yet. There's still some joy left, and there's still some wonder, I think. And that's the piece that I'm always impressed by. That as adults, we tend to think that we have to think in these deeper, broader, more specific places, and somehow we've lost the wonder, the why question, right? When you're children, often, why? But why? But why? And I think as adults, we've learned that can be annoying to another adult or another human being, but actually that's really the crux of it, is getting to that deeper level. I think about I got a beautiful letter, it's a little bit of a mom brag, but I got a beautiful letter from Shiri's teacher, from Jana at PJA on Friday, that just said, I've noticed that we've been working on Tanakh and reading, and I've noticed in these last months that Shiri has become quite the advocate against the Torah. And she's writing this letter. Why? Because Shiri keeps asking why, and saying, well, why did Eve have to be punished, but Adam's doesn't seem so bad? You know, childbirth being painful seems a lot worse than having to till the soil. You know, one is different kinds of physical labor happening there. And why does it say this and that? And my answer when Shiri had asked me this question was something along the lines of, well, that was back then, and now we understand these differences. It's not about equality. And the answer that Shiri that really resonated was, you're right. It's not fair. I think that's the piece that I'm always surprised by is really the questions that littles ask. I think the difference is that, again, as adults, we seem to see ourselves in a place of beyond certain modalities of learning. When's the last time any of you finger painted? Right. Right? That's the piece that's there is the willingness or the exploration that comes. We tend to get stuck in this space of, I'm a kinesthetic learner, I'm an auditory learner, I do it this way, I do it that way. We have no time. Those differences and being an adult change the way that transmission can happen. And I think that, like, I often get comments that I tell stories every Yom Kippur for Kol Nidre. That for me, that's a time of taking a folktale, a Jewish folktale, and using that as the basis for understanding. And some people say, we're not children. Why are you teaching us like we're children? And it breaks my heart to get that feedback, because a folktale, a story, is the way we originally learned. That's where it came. I mean, the Torah is story. It is narrative. It is ourselves. A book, when we read, PJ Library's doing tremendous work. It's not because Harold Grinspan wants his name known. It's because these stories are how we teach. And as adults, I'm always surprised at how much there seems to be a pushback from that, from just really finger painting in that moment, or hearing a story, or getting messy in that space. And I notice those differences, and it's the curiosity in me. Don't worry, you're not going to come to Yom Kippur and have a paint fight. It's not Holly. It's not that holiday. Purim would be around that time. But I do think that the curiosity in me is, how can we take where we all began, which is in that space of wonder and joy and delight and story and why, and not expect to get to the right answer, because maybe there's not one, but to be present in that space.
Thank you. There's a famous TED talk about how when we're little, education is full body, and then as we go through school, basically you lose your legs, you stop dancing, you lose your hands, you stop, and eventually it just becomes your neck and above our education. So there's a little bit of that in there. I want to segue from that to Gershon, because I think what Rabbi E brought out was maybe something that adults have lost along the way. And Gershon, who's our ritual chair right now and just been involved in a million different ways in the synagogue and different roles, you also have taught different generations of people. So I'm wondering, what is something that each group has taught you about what it means to receive Torah? Right? We learned about some of the differences in how, reaching out or teaching. What have you learned as an educator?
So I think the most interesting part for me is that when you look at kindergartners and you look at folks who have a few more years on or those in between, it's actually a matter of surprise to me, because I continuously underestimate the level of participation, the level of interaction that occurs. So as an example, we're in Kiddush Club. So Kiddush Club is, kindergarten, first, second graders, sometimes fourth or fifth grader comes in to show off and things like that. And I think to myself, well, I need to give them content, and I need to give them kind of an identity. And maybe later we can talk about ritual, but the rites of the things that need to be done. And I have to explain it I have to really explain it in a baby way to them, kind of in a way that's less. And then I get surprised that the answers I get back are very, very deep. So I'll give you an example, and I hope I don't shame the person because they're here with us. But we were talking about what goes into the mezuzah. And you start with a lower level, like, how many mezuzot do you have in your house? From 1 to 1,000,000. And then what goes inside? Well, you can put a piece of candy. No, what? But eventually we elicit this discussion about the Shema, and that leads to the ritual of saying the Shema and such, and we get that learning in. And I asked this question about, I said, at one point, a long, long time ago, there was a disagreement about whether the mezuzah should be straight up or across, and they decided, for whatever reason, to do it halfway up. And I said, do you have any idea why? And all sorts of answers. And one of the people said, because the world's not perfect. It's neither left to right or up or down. Now, this is from, somebody's 5, 6 years old. And I think to myself, that is so beyond where it comes. Then there's the other end of the scale. So I'm at Roschnitzer Manor. I'm leading the Friday night service. And I think, I really need to speak slowly and call out the pages slowly. In some cases, that's a necessity, right? So you say, we're on page 14, 1-4, 2 paragraphs down, page 1-4. And then in my mind, what that sets up is this, thinking lesser of the people that are there because they're older and maybe they've lost the capability to think through the things. And then what I see is one of the women, she's 98 years old, and whenever a prayer starts, she starts into that prayer and knows the prayer. Her son is attempting to get her to the right page, and she keeps brushing him away because she can just say it, right? And I think of all those years of ritual that have entered the mind and become part of that process. And then that knowledge was sent to the son, and the son to the granddaughter, and the granddaughter, and blah, 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 right? So I think, Rabbi, when I think about what I see in the differences across the board is that I am in wonderment and surprise of that at each level there's a depth that's beyond what I came into the room thinking that would be there. And I think this is really exciting because to the point that you made, Rabbi, right, this is the wonderment of the questions that are asked and the capability years later to reenact that over and over again and the learning across the generations as it comes. So to me, I'm that's why I get energized when I come into Kiddush Club, and I'm super energized when I come to Roschnitz Manor, and certainly energized when I come to services here and in other places.
Thank you. Let's move from, we've had a lot of prayer and words and teaching through words, not only to Cantor. So Cantor Bitone, you're charged, you're the music guy here. You're not the only music person, but that is your main role. And I'm curious how music uniquely transmits Torah. What can it do that words, or even glass art maybe, right? What is unique about music and what it transmits to people? And how have you witnessed in your work with students or the congregation a moment when a Jewish idea landed precisely because it came through song?
I'll start at the end and say never. I haven't seen, it may exist, but I haven't seen it on an individual level where I go, okay, you're not getting it, and some sort of light bulb happens with an individual with music. However, I've seen it happen on a collective level where music transforms everybody. Music shapes identity. Music shapes attachment. So, for me, I became a cantor. When you look at the storyline, you're like, okay, I can see why. When I was 12 or so, getting ready for my bar mitzvah, around my bar mitzvah, I got, I went to summer camp before my bar mitzvah, and I brought 2 tapes with me back there. Then it was cassettes only and stuff, right? One was my bar mitzvah learning tape, and the other was Kiss. I loved Judaism, and I loved music. And that did not change. And I think that for most people, the avenue for me, for synagogue attachment, for Judaism, was multifaceted, but the biggest conduit, the biggest entryway was music. And, no offense to the illustrious rabbis at these tables who do, wonderful work, but I recall liking my rabbi, but I don't remember much of what he said. I do remember the melodies that I grew up with. Many people, like Larry David, will go, "En Keloheinu, en Kadone." He'll remember that. Okay, so the other part of that is, it reaches a part of us that is so fundamental that it precedes speech. When we have a baby, we don't go, "Listen, it would be better if you stopped crying a little bit." And I'll explain to you why. We don't do that. We start humming and singing something, "Rock-a-bye, baby." We want to put it to bed or whatever. We want to, even just saying the kids' names. Well, sometimes you kind of sing-song something. Even when you speak, you sing-song it. And, I would sing melody that I wrote to "En Keloheinu, Mia, je t'aime beaucoup," and I would set it to, and I would say all these things. It's music. It reaches you before words can. And it reaches us at a level as adults that that words cannot. So if I sing to you, I want you to join me. Na 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 na. Can you that do it better than me? Na na, hey Jude. Again. Na 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 na. Okay, there's a feeling that music brings. It's a nigun. Na, da, da. There are no words there, but even with the words, it brings something else to you. And then you add this. This person next to me is singing. That person over there is singing. We're part of something. We're part of this magic that's happening by us joining in this collective experience that is beyond words. I remember this great arranger in Montreal named Christopher Smith, whose sister played bass for Prince, by the way. And he used to say, music is an elevated form of speech. And I think that's true. So the other thing is storytelling. It's enhanced by tone and delivery. Goldilocks went down the path to visit her grandmother. Goldilocks went down the path through the forest to see her grandmother. You give that to 10 storytellers, there'll be slightly nuance, but everyone's going to sing it differently because they're trying to transmit something. It's not just speech. There's a sing-song thing to that. Music does that. Music puts that there for you. Avinu Malkeinu. Father and king, or if you want to make it non-gendered, we can do that, but father and king up there, and there's a text to it. Now, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, gives you a feeling. It's a different feeling from when Barbara Streisand sings a different version of that, which is also gorgeous. But that's the point. I want to create, if I'm singing Avinu Malkeinu, and I want to create a certain mood in my congregation, I'll choose a different melody. But that dee 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 works because it creates a certain beautiful mood that is not it's not necessarily found in the words. It adds to the words, and you all know it. So it brings you together, and chances are, a generation or 2 generations or 3 generations before you sang the same tune. And you go, oh, I'm connected to the people next to me, and I'm connected to my past. And that is extremely profound. And that's also what's happening with the Beatles, but that's another story. So, look, another thing is, I remember I was barely at camp. I was at camp 2 years in my life. And one of those years, I remember going to flagpole every morning. And every morning we sang, Kol od balevav penima. Wow. What am I being taught there as an 11-year-old kid? A whole lot. I'm a Jew. These are all Jews. This is our ancestral homeland. This is a song of our people. We have other songs this is the song of our people. All of that. So when you talked about communicating something to a child and a student, that's an example where I'm the student, it wasn't, listen, we're going to learn, and here's the lesson you're going to learn. It's embodied. It gets to your soul, or to use a Yiddish word, kishkas, right? It gets to you. And, and how do you, look, one thing that I want to say also is I'm passionate about this, as you can tell, and I want to transmit passion for for our identity, for Jewish heritage, Jewish culture, and pride in our identity through music and tefillah, but through music. So I think it's as important for me to have a community sing Hatikva or Yerushalayim Shel Zahav as it is to have a community sing Adon Olam. And I will stop there for now.
Thank you, Cantor. You know, you touched on it in the end, but I actually want to go back, just that notion about how a Jewish idea landing. So when we were in rabbinical school, we studied a lot of liturgy. And the books back then that we studied from to learn about the different prayers and services and holidays were incredibly boring. The one book was by a German scholar called Ellbogen, and we joked that if you're having trouble falling asleep, you would just put that volume next to your nightstand, 2 pages in, you were sleeping so deeply, soundly. And Cantor Lipton, Chazan Jeremy Lipton, right, was my teacher for that class at that point, and trying to get all these different modes. And yes, I got it, but one day in class he did every single Kaddish for every single part of the year, one after another. Wow. Right? First of all, switching modes like that is not easy. That is Jedi Chazan stuff. But it just it all landed and made sense, right? From the Chatzi Kaddish of Shabbat with Torah service to verses during the week, to even Kaddish de Itata, right? The graveside Kaddish, which we almost never do, to Shalem, and all of these modes. And it was, I feel sacred time. And the expression of sacred time in all these different ways through that music. So I told that Cantor so that he would know at least, right? That he would know, I got to witness how that Jewish idea finally landed with me at that moment.
You're also speaking about nusach, so if I sang on a Shabbat, Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, I might lose my job. Because as...
Keep doing high holiday melodies
Did we eat?
Yes.
Did we eat?
Yeah, that is Rosh Hashanah Erev, or Yom Kippur Erev, the evening. And you kind of know that. That makes it special. And also, speaking of high holidays, Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah, where it tells us where we are. Nusach tells us whether, and it's also the same for Moroccans and Yemenites and Iraqis. Everyone has their nusach. Ashkenazim have this nusach, and it tells you, you can tell a cantor, a prayer leader, improvise everything. Here, go. It's nice to know what the framework is instead of inventing everything from the start. And that's what nusach does. It creates these slalom poles. It tells you, okay, you got to hit this mark, hit that mark, and it tells me and it tells us, okay, you're Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu v'lo yavoteinu. Shabbat Nusach, we're in the Shabbat Amidah. I know where I am. The risk is, as people attend services less and less over time, that knowledge, that sense of, this is right. This feels where I know where I am in the service now. I'm at this part. I'm at the Shema. I'm at the, I'm on high holiday mode. I'm in festival mode. I have to do it. Baruch atah Adonai. Amen. High holiday. You know you're in the high holiday mode. Guess what's happening in a few months? That's why we're thinking about this. And it's beautiful. But what do we do with a generation or two from now if people stopped coming to services. I would put forward to you that while we should try to maintain tradition in various ways, not to be so attached to it that you forget the larger picture. I think music is key, and music evolves just as culture evolves. And it may evolve, but whatever attachment we have to Judaism will always be musical.
Thank you.
Among other
Thank you,
things.
Kenner. Eddie, in your session at the beginning that kicked off this evening, you said at one point the sort of luxury an artist has, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you think, whether you like it or not, right? You, the artist, have a process that you need to go through, and ultimately there's a product of the process, and then the viewer creates their own process of meaning, of impact with that. But you also are the official nudnik of the downstairs minion, right? Who constantly says, reminds people that it is an honor and a privilege to sign up and lead those services as you try to fill in those slots. And that is very different from the artist process, right, with that. So in what way does being the official nudnik?
It's a nudge maven.
Nudge maven, okay. Well,
It's a little nicer.
In what ways, though, does that role differ from using the arts? And more importantly, because I think there's always surprises for people, like, are there surprising overlaps where there's something in common between the work you do as with fused glass and your work organizing the minion?
The overlap part of the question, I think, is really a little bit harder. I'm a teacher, and so I really channel teaching stuff with being a nudge. I really love being a nudge maven because I feel like I give permission for people to change their relationship with prayer. We get folks who know prayers but aren't comfortable leading them. And they'll say, I would volunteer, but I'm really not good. I don't know how to lead. And we have a conversation on the phone. I'll practice with you. I'll send you a recording. Because what I know to be true, I might know a song like Hey Jude. Don't ask me to sing it for you, solo, Vesmir. You wouldn't want to hear that, and I wouldn't want to do that to myself. And it's the same with prayer. You might feel good singing along with the cantor, but getting up and leading is a very different thing. And I see my role in the Maven role as facilitating and giving permission. So we have a number of people who will lane for the first time. We have a number of people who will lead just a prayer. I'll just do Ein Keloheinu. Awesome. And it changes how a person has a relationship with service. Because I agree with the cantor that we see a diminishing number of folks coming to shul. But if we empower people not to be afraid, most people don't have a healthy relationship with prayer because they don't know how to do it. And they expect the light switch to come in. And that's where I think the overlap in terms of an artistic process is that you can't walk into any space and instantly feel transformed and instantly feel like you can be talking to God. And who is God anyway? But the music, the company, so Downstairs Minion is a very warm and welcoming place. And as people become comfortable and they feel welcomed, just tonight somebody came to me and said, I've been enjoying coming to Downstairs Minion, and maybe I would like to have a bat mitzvah sometime. Wow, right? That's a tremendous thing. And I shared back a story that Gershon and I both do a lot of volunteer work at CSP. A number of years ago, there was this wonderful man of blessed memory, David Singer, who would come to Morning Minion here, and he would always tell me at CSP, I'm not sure if I believe in God, I don't know why I keep doing this, but I keep coming. And he called me one day and said, so in about 8 months, I'm gonna turn 90. said, really? Mazel tov. That's not why I'm calling. Well, it is, really. So, okay, what's going on? Well, my son called me just a few minutes ago. And he said, Dad, you're gonna be 90. What do you want to do? How do you want to celebrate your 90th birthday? And I don't know why this came out of my mouth. I want to have a bar mitzvah. And so I said, well, that's awesome. He said, can you teach me to lane? Yeah. And I know the prayers, but I can't lead them. Boom. And that's when it became really clear to me. That's when he helped me understand that there's so much potential. People can make a different connection when they feel like they can master a prayer and stand up proudly and lead it. And so if I worked really hard for a year and maybe got some tutoring on Hey Jude, maybe, no, no. But I think it's about giving permission and extending the invitation and making sure that everyone is appreciative and accepting of someone's efforts to do it for the first time. And I think it's because of the teachers I've had, Cantor Chaim Feifel and Linda Shivers, a few others, that really gave me the courage to stand up and lead, and it changed my relationship with prayers. So that's what I want to do for others.
Beautiful. So I did hear an overlap, by the way, because right up here we have right up there, give yourself permission. And I'm going to talk about this later in June, but I think we're at this beautiful turning point. We know that for generations, people were leaving religion and leaving Judaism, and the pendulum always comes back. And we have studies that across faiths and across the country, people are actually returning to houses of worship again. So there's always this Jewish anxiety that the world is ending, that it's the last generation of Jews, with good reason. We know what happened earlier today in Colorado, right? But that's not the whole story. And we are at this amazing inflection point. So, Cantor is right to have that anxiety. And as Eddie said, and as the tides are sharing, even at 90, sometimes we come back. And that really is what the goal of this evening with this notion of transmitting Torah has been about. So I wish we had more time for this panel. So I have to channel the first rabbi I worked for when I was ordained from school, Rabbi Mel Cerner, who had this one phrase he'd say quite frequently. The only thing worse than being asked to do something you haven't prepared for is not being asked to do something you have prepared for. That's my apology to the panelists, because there were more questions that were, that I know everyone has worked with and spent effort to generate. And so on behalf of Mel Cerner, I apologize. But more importantly, I want to thank you all for all the different ways that you have been invested in transmitting Torah, not just to the congregation, but first also to yourselves, and the ripples that continue out, because it may have started with Moses at Sinai, but even down to today, it continues, and we here are that example that there is an unbroken chain, a shalhevet, shosheret shel masoret. There's a sort of a necklace of the tradition, and each of us is a holy link in that. So, se umad, let us all go and learn. And we're gonna. I want to invite people to grab a siddur in the back, and I'm gonna use something that Eddie said, which I learned from Rabbi Gedalia Flair. As you get there, a lot of times people feel they have to follow every word in the prayer book, and then they get lost or bored or who knows what. You can follow as Cantor leads, but if you want to just find one phrase that really speaks to you, you can just dive in that and repeat it the whole time, and invest yourself in that. And sometimes that's the way to enter in also. So, Yasher Koach.
I'm sure you knew, but the name Yehuda, you knew about the name Yehuda?
What are you asking about?
Yehuda is the name of God, the exact name of God that you are not allowed to say, with the
You like that? Yeah. Yeah, I know. All right. 39B. What? Oh, that? Okay. Shkoch. Okay. Both. When Barachu, and then I'll turn back. Turn back time. $39B. 39A. I think. Yeah. Page 39A, we rise for Barachu. Barechu et Adonai Mevorach. Baruch Adonai Mevorach leolam vaed. Please be seated. Page 39. Baruch Adonai melech haolam. ומביא יום מביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המריב ערבים. Page 40. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, המחבת תורתו. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. Page 41. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל מאודיך. והיה אם שמוע תשמעו זאת אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם לאהבה אדוני אלוהיכם ולא תאמרו. There's something, don't you? ויאמר אדוני אשר מורדה בני ישראל מטה עליהם ועשו להם ציצית תקן ציצית תקן לכם ציצית ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם לחייך שמרתם זונים אחר למען תזכרו ועשיתם כל שסתם ידי שם עליך אני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת Page 43. 43. No? 44. Thank you. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה זה לי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Page 45. This is a traditional Moroccan tune. Hashkivenu Adonai. The Moroccan words, the Sephardic words are different, so I have to set it to this text. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu malkeinu lechaim. ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ותקננו בעצה טובה מלפניך והושיענו למען שמך והגן בדנו והסר מעלינו אויב דבר וחרב ורע ויגון והסר שטן מלפנינו ומאחרינו ובצל כנפיך תסתירנו כי אל שומרנו ומצילנו אתה כי אל מלך חנונה ורחום אתה ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ושלום מעתה ועד עולם ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. We rise, page 46 in the middle. וידבר משה את מועדי אדוני אל בני ישראל יתגדל ויתקדש שם רבה בעלמא דיברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביום מכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יש מרבה מברך לעלם ולעלמא היה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמד קודשה בריחו לילה מן כל מנחתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. Big jump forward to page 306 for the festival Amidah, which is read silently. 306. Remember, it's Shavuot. השבועות הזה, זמן מתן תורתנו. שלום רב על כל עם ישראל. Once you've completed the Amidah, please turn back to page 54 for Kaddish Shalem. I won't start it just yet. I'll give it another moment. To make the nigun more Jewish. Page 54, Kaddish Shalem. יתגדל ויקדש שמר רבה, ועלמה דיברה, כאילו טבע נכמל חוטא, וחייכון ומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בזמן קריב מרו, אמן. יש מרבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם, ויתנשא ותדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי תקודשה בריחו לאלה, מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ומרו, אמן. תתקבל צורת ההון והאותון לכל ישראל, קודם אבו הון דבשמיה מרו, אמן. יהא שלמה רבה משמיה וחיים עלינו, וכל ישראל מרו, אמן. עושה שלום ירומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, וכל ישראל, וכל יושבי תבל ואמרו, amen. We rise for עלינו on page 56. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים, משתחווים, מודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שזה שם מסד הארץ. על כן נקווה לחיינו אלוהינו. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. You may
Please
seated.
be seated. On Yisker, I'll read the list of names again, but because we're talking about transmission, and because everyone, as I said, really is a link in the chain of Jewish tradition, it's one of the reasons we remember people. And so within our community, we lost a number of people over the last year, and we called to mind Benjamin Volpes, Charles Sachs, Craig Ackerson, David German, Dorothy Kaufman, Ed Brenner, Elaine Kogan, Elisa Stevens, Ella Stern, Emily Kipnis, Gary Rosenthal, Gary Weinstein, Gilbert Schulman, Jay Abramovitz, Joel Rubin, Kay Thimolius, Lawrence Meyer, Lawrence Harwin, Lawrence Rosen, Leonard Shapiro, Louis Newberger, Lynn Betsina, Sarah Cohn, Sharon Strauss, Sharon Miller Spitzer, Stanley Hodes, Yevgenia Chizik. So to those, I also want to invite anyone who's also reciting Kaddish at this time for the year of loss or for a yard site will rise and join together on page 58. Yit Gadal V'yit Gadash Shemer Rabba V'yalma Divra Kirutei V'yamlich Malchutei Mechaychon V'yamechon V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala V'zman Kari V'yamru Amen. Yehei Shmer Rabba Mevarak Le'olam U'lamei Almaya Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitalal Shmei D'Kudsha B'richu L'Ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiram B'alma V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'yimru Amen. May the one who makes peace in the high places bring peace and comfort, the blessing of memories, and all of the love that got transmitted from them to you, and make it for a blessing. So services tomorrow, 9:30, but probably more important right now is we got a little bit more service to do, right, Canner? Where are we going?
One more conclusion.
Yep.
We have a conclusion, but I'm thinking about replacing it with something, if we can do that. I'm suggesting that we go to page 154 and do the middle paragraph, since it's Shavuot, and we're talking about
Oh,
Torah.
beautiful. Perfect.
Let's enlighten our eyes in your Torah, attach our hearts to your commandments, unite our heart to love and revere your name, that we may never be put to shame. Ve'ha'erneinu betoratecha ve'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha. Again. Ve'ha'erneinu betoratecha ve'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha. ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו. נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך, והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחל לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך. חג שמח. But it's not over.
Well, you know, Ein Kemach, Ein Torah, Ein Torah, Ein Kemach. Anyone know that phrase? Okay, a few hands. Would somebody who knows tell everyone else here what it means in relationship to cheesecake?
If there's no
So you see that? You thought it was this Jewish shtick that there's always got to be a festival meal of some sort connected with a holiday. It's actually connected to Torah and its transmission. It is quite literally another mode of teaching. And that's true if there are particular recipes that your Bobby or Zeta or whoever made that just speak of Shabbat or Pesach or whatnot. And milk was considered the sweetest thing, just as Torah is the sweetest thing. Nobody knows why we specifically eat dairy on Shavuot. Some say it's because until the Torah was given, we didn't have the kosher laws. But I like the notion of it being something sweet, just as Torah is. So I invite everyone. We'll go into the Isaac foyer. We'll enjoy some cheesecake, and then we're going to come back around 9, maybe a few minutes earlier. I don't know. We'll see how hungry people are, because Gershon has prepared another wonderful lesson for us, and I hope you'll stay because he worked hard to get ready for that, and I'm looking forward to sitting at your feet, as we say in the traditional circles, and learning Torah from you. Chag Sameach.
I don't want to feel like we're scattered among the nations here. Hey, everybody. Thank you for all being here. So today is it's a day of learning, Lil Tikkun, right? This is an evening of learning. John wants us to stay till midnight so we can hear the clap of thunder, but we'll forgo that. I wanted to start with something that Jerome Bruner, who's a pedagogue from, a teacher of both children and others, from 1960, he said, "We begin with the hypothesis that any subject can be taught effectively in some intellectually honest form to anyone at any stage of development." And this is sort of my mantra that teaching occurs at all levels. And what I wanted to do first, there's two things we're going to do, two different teaching methods. We're going to learn about the portion of Et Hanan, which is in Deuteronomy, and someone said before that's the retelling of the law, and we're going to focus on one law, one set of sentences from the Ten Commandments, and we're going to do it in two different ways. One way is we're going to study the text, and another way is we're going to have a little play, and hopefully, I've already got one volunteer of the three folks to do this, and you can see two different teaching methods, and also hopefully learn something about it. The first thing I want to talk to, though, is that when we're transmitting information or knowledge, the first thing is just to transmit the content of that knowledge itself. So understanding the text, and you do it in different ways. So Morav, Vicky already talked about, do they know Hebrew or not? Do they know their right from their left, like the citizens of Nineveh? And what? And also much cattle. And you start with a plain meaning, right? It's not worthwhile to go into the externals of philosophy and stuff, because you want to teach that first plain meaning. What is the literal piece? And then you try to create, as a teacher, when I say the word teacher, small t, that's all of us, right? Parents and neighbors and stuff, is Jewish identity and connection. So helping folks create a personal connection with the Jewish people's history and their customs, and then the community, how that all fits in. How do we fit in? Where do I sit? So I look at my Google map, and I notice that I'm sitting among these people of the Northwest, and some of them are my religious colleagues as Jews. That's the community. And then what are the lessons for living? So I've learned the text, or whatever it is, or the song, or the play, and I know my personal connection to that. But what's the lesson that I learned in living? What's the Jewish value? So, for instance, as an example of Jewish value is, what can we tell from the character of Abraham, right? And we all know the story. Abraham ran towards the angels, even though he was only, what day of his circumcision? Third day from circumcision. He was aching. He was sitting on his stone outside his tent, but he ran up and ran to greet the strangers. And so we understand this social emphasis of Kabbalat Panim, of being able to bring in the guests. And then we learn mitzvot. Those are how Torah and learning provides guidance for our life. like Kashrut or Shabbat or lighting the candles or saying the Shema when you go to sleep, right? And then it teaches us an ethical framework. It introduces the framework within which Judaism provides guidance. And then it also, interesting love and respect for Torah, and Torah with a big T and a little t, you know, all of our teachings. You have to create, you want to create a sense of holiness and a reverence for Torah. And then the last piece as a teacher is adapting it to the audience. So we talked about before already, the artists and the singers, the children and those who are older, and being able to create a diverse style of learning. So incorporating visual aids, or in camp we would do sociodrama. So let me give you a little story of camp. So we have these campers, they're 12, 13, 14 years old, and the theme is the creation of Israel. Now, Israel's far away, and for kids that age, it's just another country like, in some sense, like Ukraine, or my parents visited France, or whatever. So how do you teach them to be proud of the fact that they are Jews connected to this land? Now, the way Esther and I did it when we were at camp was, this is kind of interesting. It was a two-part process. Number one is we got the camp cooking staff, right, to dress up as British soldiers. And at nighttime, we took our kids in their shorts and stuff, and we went through pathways of the campsite, which in the daytime, everybody knows what it is, but at night, it's all different. And there were guards along the way, and we had to escape through those guards in order to make it to the Promised Land, which is, an area of the camp which we named Palestine, right? Then the next day, we teach text about David Ben-Gurion and the creation of the state of Israel. And that day, my beautiful bride sewed a British flag out of strips of cloth. We ran the British flag up the flagpole, and we had a ceremony of those same folks who were dressed up in British uniforms. They brought the flag down, and then one of the campers brought the Israeli flag in and raised it, and we all sang Hatikva. You see, so through this methodology of doing the sociodrama, we're able to instill I'm proud of that flag. I can sing to that flag, and that flag means something. And then, of course, the rest of the camp went on. So I just wanted to give you an example of the type of things that can be done with folks of all ages. What I'd like to do is get some volunteers to pass this out, and hopefully I've kept a copy. What we're going to look at right now is I'm going to ask for some volunteers to do some reading. But we're looking at the portion of Et Hanan, and we're looking at 3 verses, 12, 13, 14, or 4 verses, and 15. Okay, we almost got it. And just to set the stage for it, what's happening here is Moses is spending the whole book of Deuteronomy. Believe it or not, they're actually on the shore of the Jordan River, right? As I recall, they were right there at the gateway to the Promised Land. And Moses says, the only thing standing between you and the Promised Land is me to go through this whole book and retell the whole story of the Jews before we get in. And let me repeat to you the 10 Commandments. This is a wonderful thing that we're going to look at right now, because we're going to look at the 10 Commandments from Deuteronomy, and we're going to look at the 10 Commandments from Shavuot, from Exodus. And you would think that because this is a repetition, this would be an exact repetition, but it isn't. So, first thing is, I'd like somebody to read in English the verse 12. Who would like to read verse 12?
Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy as your God Hashem has commanded you.
And the next one?
6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son, Adonai, or your daughter, your male or female slave, your ox or your ass, or any of your cattle, or the stranger in your settlements, so that your male and female slave may rest as you do.
Thank you. And can you read the...
Remember that you were is that the one? Yeah. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and your God, Adonai, freed you from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, your God, Adonai, has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day.
Okay, that was pretty straightforward. So, question. What's the story being told here? Anybody? What's the story? What's the story at its simplest level? Just literally, what is the story?
All people are created equal.
That's more than simple. That's it. All people are created equal, because on the seventh day, right, your female slave, your ox, and everybody's got to rest, right? Okay, so that's kind of the very plain meaning. So extend it out. What are some other things that we can learn from this particular passage?
That Shabbat should be observed by everybody in like a way that's holy and not just like it's any other day. It's supposed to be special.
Excellent. So the Shabbat is special. It's kadosh. It's separated out. So we say the word kadosh is holy. It kind of has this. It actually has the meaning of being separate from, or different than, or holier than thou. It's just different, right? Something is separated. We are people. We are holy people. Kadosh. You are a nation of Kedoshim to me, and the Shabbat is kadosh. Do you notice any political kind of coloring to this at all? Okay, tell me about it.
Remember that you were a slave, so don't enslave others.
Okay, so there's a little bit of that. Is there any difference between male and female in here? None, right? So this is it's a pretty straightforward lesson for us in terms of this 10 commandments, this particular one commandment. Now, let's extend this, and on the last page, we have exactly the same commandment, right? This is commandment 5, 4, commandment 4, 4? Okay, 4, thank you. This is commandment 4. Let's see what it says here. I'll read it out. First line, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Right? In Deuteronomy, we said, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy as your God has commanded you. Right? Second one, but 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is within your settlement. A little bit difference there. And then, for in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh day. Therefore Adonai blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So first of all, what do we notice that's different about this first one from the second one?
That they didn't talk about their slaves being able to rest as you do, and that they didn't talk about you being slaves at all yourself.
Interesting. Right. So, but I'd like to pick up on what you said. So here we are at Sinai. We've been there for a little while. Down comes the commandments. This is one of the commandments, right? We all remember the Mel Brooks one. I bring you the 15 and the 10 commandments, right? The 10 commandments, and he brings down really all of the commandments, and it doesn't really talk about, interestingly, us coming out of Egypt when we just came out of Egypt, right? Why do you think that is? By the way, I don't know the answer, but why? So because the memory is fresh, because the memory is fresh for us, and we just came out of Egypt. Okay, let's talk about another difference. Is there any other difference? What do they talk?
This is the first time we learned that God rested on the Sabbath day. So now we're being asked to be God-like in our behavior.
Thank you. Really? We were made in God's image?
Because God rested.
Oh, and because we rest. So isn't this interesting? The first time around, they said, why should we rest? Because God rested. The second time around, didn't say it, or maybe it didn't have to say it. We'll talk about that in a minute.
They also mention how, like the creation of like the world, but they didn't mention it in the first part. So it's like kind of a little difference there. That was like kind of neat to add.
Yeah, interesting. So some of the rabbis said, well, God gave it, at the first time around in Breshit, in Shemot. Second time around, this is Moses' retelling. But I want to go back to that one piece that we talked about, that somebody just brought up about the difference, is that God resting on the seventh day. Why do you think, once again, I don't know the answer, why do you think that wasn't brought up in the second telling? Why didn't Moses retell it that way? Okay. Assumed, maybe? Yeah. Maybe. I always thought that because they... Oh, go ahead.
This just came to me, right? In Exodus, we're still in our slave mentality, right? We don't view ourselves as agencies, as full human beings, because we haven't experienced that. And so that's the place where we're being told, actually, you're all that. In Deuteronomy, they've been free for 40 years. The slaves have died off. Free people are there. They need to remember the curse that free people have, which is not to remember those who are less than they are.
I saw a hand up here.
Isn't it also in Exodus, this is the first time we are meeting our God?
Thank you. All life is sacred.
There's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance in that the middle of the commandment condones you having slaves by saying you just have to let them rest on Shabbat, and then it says that we should remember that we were slaves and that was a bad thing. That's kind of a dissonance.
Yeah, the one thing that my teachers always taught me is that the Torah is sort of like a reality show in a certain way. It doesn't hide the defects of the people that are in it. In fact, we can tell whole stories about our patriarchs and matriarchs and the things that they did and how we got to where we are. But one of the things about teaching is that you can fantasize a little bit about it. You can cover it with stories and things like that. But in the end, you really have to get to the core of what the truth is that's there, whether you're a small kid or an adult. An example of that, just a story of that, is my granddaughter's 4.5 years old. Somewhere along the line, she got into this Frozen world, the world of Frozen, right? So Grandma's got to buy her the Frozen dress for Halloween. She wears it every day. In February, we have to buy another one, and then we have to buy the crown. Then we have to buy the Frozen shoes, right? And then the Frozen shoes fall apart, so then Grandma has to sew it back together again, and blah, blah, blah. But my kids tell her that when she is 6 years old, they will take her to Disneyland. And last weekend, she tells Grandma, when I go to Disneyland, I'm going to meet the real Elsa, and she's going to be able to freeze things. Okay? So we had this urge to tell her there is no Santa Claus. But we decided that was her parents' role to do when they get to Disneyland. But what I mean is eventually we kind of grow out of some of those stories, but the truth of each story is there to remind us, and that just to go back to the key, start with the simple. What is the narrative attempting to tell us? How do I tie it to myself personally, or how do we help the people tie it to themselves personally? How do we then translate that into a certain love, how will you define that, for Israel, for Torah, for Judaism, for rituals, the things that we do every day so they become ingrained. Today I had this amazing thing. My granddaughter's doing this ballet thing, and my mother's there, so she's 91, and we have 4.5. And my mother turns to Micah, my son, who after age like 13 kind of gave up on Judaism for a little while, and says, these are really small children. And then he says back to her, you mean Yeladim Ktanim? Yes. And my mother will verify. So I fell over, I almost fell over. How did that stay in his mind, right? Because over and over and over again, and it found meaning in, when we exemplify it, they do, it eventually gets into the soul through ritual. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of run this same thing, but very quickly in a little 3-minute play. And I need to get a volunteer, and I already have a volunteer for Delilah. So come up, Delilah. Oh, I forgot my prop for you. Well, because Delilah's a hairdresser, of course, we know that. And I need a Moses. Who will play? Can be man, woman, anybody. Who would like to be Moses?
There we go. I've been accused of it before.
All right. Mr. Shapiro, this is going to be your little microphone here.
I get a microphone? Hello.
Oh, got it. Okay. And we need Miriam.
Dad, you can be Miriam.
Miriam. Oh, there we have Miriam. Okay. Here's your script. Now I want you to really act it out and
I got you.
follow along.
Hairdresser of Samson. Okay, yeah. Hey, I thought you said we were free, so how come you were telling us what to do? I mean, to rest. How to rest? What does freedom mean exactly? Do we have a choice or not?
Who are you? And what is your trade?
I'm Delilah, and I cut hair for a living. I need to work on Shavuot. That's when my customers have time to come to me. Why can't I choose a different day of the week to rest? Like Chinese restaurants that are closed on Mondays.
Because God did it after creation, and then God took a whole day of rest, a whole day to relax, contemplate. It sounds good, doesn't it? If this was good enough for God, wouldn't you agree it should also be good enough for us after working hard the whole week? Don't we need to set aside time to reflect on the wonders of creation? Come on, let's take a break together.
Should I lose the business? I have a family to feed. I don't get all these rules. You said we would be free.
Having rules doesn't mean that you aren't free, but we have guidelines for our new freedom. Also, this commandment is not just to rest and do nothing at all. It means not doing any matter of work where you are creating stuff. Maybe we need to just stop and admire God's creation in a different way on our day of rest, as God did on the seventh day. I guess that now it's our turn to do so. If you do, you will see that you will be rewarded somehow. Get it?
You know, Delilah, If everyone follows this, then you really won't lose business on Shabbat. Everyone will stay at home to rest and contemplate. You could be creative with your hours and still observe the Shabbat. You could offer your services before and after work, or even go to people's place of work at lunchtime. This is important enough that we can make it work, and we need to do it.
Thank you. Round of applause for those folks. So what I want to conclude with is that many of you have been parents, are still parents, and you know that the work of parents are like the work of teachers and the work of everybody else, in which at work, for instance, when you're a leader, to me, the most important part is to instill, to pass on. The rabbi talked about Masoret, the tradition, to Masar, to give it forward, to transmit this. And what I hope is that what we get is the kind of transmission that we can be part of a transmission that is very, very clear. Do you hear me now? Versus the kind of game like telephone where it ends up coming in one way and out the other. That's one side. Then this other side that Eddie brought up is that sometimes along the line of transmission, it's good to ask questions and to do things differently a little bit and try out different things. And as an example of that is, the cantor told me a little while ago, I don't remember when, that the tune that we sing for Shema Yisrael, I actually thought it was from Sinai. I mean, gosh, is there nobody in the world, wherever I go to the Philippines and they have that tune. I go to Europe and they use that tune, right? I went to other places. But he says it's only a couple 100 years, something like that tune, couple 300 years, I thought he said. I mean, it's a really, in the span of time, it's really recent. I know it's not that recent. And then this, said, that tune, Shalom, Bim, Romav, when did that come about? 1969, that tune. Yeah, right? So somewhere along that transmission, somebody decided they were going to do a little bit different, but they didn't change the Shema. They just changed how the Shema was sung. And now we look at it and we think, or Oseh Shalom. Wow, that's been around forever. So, number one, you can transmit tradition, and it's really great if you do it without changing it. And number two, you can transmit tradition, and it's really fantastic if you add to it and add a little piece to it, right? All right, Chag Sameach. Thank you.
there is no place.